Start. Okay. Call the meeting of the Board of Finance to order. It's a regular meeting, Monday, July 29th, 2024. The meeting's called to order at 5:38. Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Hearing none, move on to item number 3, approval of minutes of June 24th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting minutes as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Minutes are accepted. Item number 4, a report regarding the 2023 budget surplus in compliance with the charter requirements. We were going to have this report from Bob Aram.
Yes. Hi, could you get the,
Bob, I hope there's, because we've talked about this a few times, I hope there isn't any confusion left about what we were looking for. I think that you and I have gone through this enough times, so what I do expect to see, I did speak to the clerk and asked about, in our CEO's report, the most recent one, or I think the most recent one, the May report, Scott reported that there was a budget surplus of 5.5, I'm sorry.
perfect, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So I assume that we're talking about the same thing, but.
Sure, and just for those on the phone and the rest of the committee members, a lot of this information, just like the committee chair had just stated, has been shared back and forth in email. But Committee Chair Salemi thought it would benefit the entire committee and those on the phone if we just did a quick review. This is 6, maybe 7 slides, and I'm just going to cover it real quick. So let's start off with the charter requirements for the budget development. What I have on the left side of this slide is the charter chapter 3. And it's in chapter 3 of the charter is for finances, budget, and tax. And so there are 16 provisions here in this charter that speaks to the Board of Finance's responsibilities, my responsibilities. There's 16 items, but it's only 6 pages long. Most of these items are only a paragraph or so. So on the right side of the slide, what we have is our budget calendar. And I kind of color-coded our budget calendar so you could see how the left side of the slide is the charter requirement, and it'll be the same color as the right side of the slide, which is our budget calendar for the what we did last year to adopt the current year's budget. So let's first of all, section 1 of 16, that just talks about the Board of Finance, its composition, what makes up the Board of Finance. But section 2, you'll see in orange, and then you'll see in orange on the right side our budget calendar. It just says that we need to furnish to the district board at or before its regular meeting in November the estimates for the budget. Now you'll see in orange that we actually scheduled that on, what is that, October 2nd. So we fulfilled that responsibility. We submitted our estimates to the board, but the last sentence of that paragraph, the entire section, says such estimates and expenditures and revenue shall be referred by the district board then to the Board of Finance. So what I did on the right side of the slide is I showed all the Board of Finance meetings in blue. And that's what section 3.3 says then. It says the Board of Finance shall review and amend if necessary and furnish to the district board at its December meeting an itemized budget of the estimated expenditures and revenues again for the ensuing year. So all of those things in blue, you'll see that we first gave it to the Board of Finance on September 27th. And then October 2nd, the district board officially refers it to the Board of Finance. Board of Finance has another meeting on October 25th, and then another meeting on November 9th. And so that's how we comply with sections 2 and 3. Sections 4, 5, and 6 just describe the parts of the budget. The first part of the budget is those supported by tax revenues, and that's the general fund, right? And the second part of the budget are those financed from water revenues, that's the water budget. And then 3.6 talks about the enterprise fund, and we have and it says funded from user charges, fees, rates, and rentals, and that's our hydroelectric. So section 3.3 talked about the Board of Finance reviewing the budget. 4, 5, and 6 just talks about the different parts of the budget, general fund, water, utility, and the hydro. And then it goes to section 7 that talks about the publication and the adoption of the budget. And I highlighted that in peach. It's kind of the peach color on the left and peach color, the very bottom one. The very bottom one on the budget calendar is just the December 4th approval. The section 7 from the charter says that we have to publish the proposal that's being considered on that December 4th meeting for 3 consecutive days in one or more newspapers within said district. And it can include Sundays. And so we do that through the district clerk. The district clerk complies with section 3.7, publishes the budget. And then we have the meeting on December 4th, and it is approved. So that's just to show you that the chapter 3 is like I said, relatively concise. It's only 6 pages long, but that's how we comply with 1 through 7 and get the budget adopted. So section 8, that's the limitations of expenditures and supplemental. So this is an important, chronology, because we just had the first 7 steps approving the budget, and then we go right into the limitations. And here's section 8. I kind of put red dots just to highlight it, make it easy to read. The first sentence just say, hey, you can't exceed this budget that we just adopted. The second dot says, unless the district board, or it gives permission to the district board upon approval of this Board of Finance, can make an additional supplemental appropriation to the budget. And then the third part just says, as long as there's a resolution and the chief financial officer certifies that the balance actually exists free from encumbrance. So you have this long budget process. In December, you say, this is what we're spending. This section 8 just says, if you want to spend beyond what's already been adopted, you can, but the board needs a recommendation from the Board of Finance, and it has to be in the form of a resolution where I say that, yes, the money's available. If you want to use this supplemental appropriation, there is, in fact, money available. So, nowhere in there did it talk about me certifying the prior year's financial performance. And that's the $5.5 million that we talked about. So the charter doesn't require me to certify it. We just went through all the provisions of the charter. But you know what? The fund balance policy that you approved does require that I certify it. You'll see that the fund balance policy was first approved in September of 2019 and more recently amended in December of 2021. And I highlighted the area where I have to bring before the district board by its September meeting and present the most recent completed fiscal year's unassigned fund balance to the district board. And specifically, it goes on to say, I'll identify any fund balance target in excess of those balances greater than 35% of the revenue, or shortfalls for those balances less than 30% of the revenue. So the fund balance says, yes, I need to present these numbers by the September meeting. September was chosen because that's when we're developing the budget for the upcoming year. It's a logical time. You'll remember, I think it was back in 2022, we had a surplus over the 35%. It equaled $2.5 million. We brought it before the Board of Finance and ultimately the district board, and it was the district board decided to use it to keep the ad valorem low for the sewer fund. I think that might have been the first year that we kept it flat. I can't remember, but it reduced the amount of ad valorem that would have been charged if we didn't use the surplus. So we're not going to wait till December to share this information. We shared this information as soon as it was certified through our completed audit. We shared it in June 24th. Our Board of Finance meeting, the last Board of Finance meeting, when we had, remember Jessica Aniskoff came and presented the financials? Well, then I got up and I spoke, and I even quoted the page numbers. I said, and let's take a look at page 23. Our unassigned fund balance is $38.4 million. If you look at page 25, the total revenues is $93.8. If you divide the 38 by the 93, you get a ratio of 40.9%. Then I reminded, you guys know better than me because you created it before I even got here, but I reminded the committee that the fund balance policy range said that ratio should be between 30 and 35%. And so I just gave you the calculation. Hey, the calculation was 40%. The maximum is 35. You have a 5.9% surplus or $5.5 million. So I didn't wait till December. I presented it when we presented the audit in June, but also in that audit, right following the table of contents is the transmittal letter. The transmittal letter is signed by both Scott and me, and you'll see the paragraph up on the top there. It says that we maintain a positive unassigned fund balance, and I have in parentheses that it was 40.9%. And I go on to say that the district board will determine the use of the 5.9% excess, and in past years has applied it to the subsequent year's budget to help lower the ad valorem tax burden. But not only in the transmittal letter, which is, 8 pages long, but then we have like that 25-page management discussion and analysis. So the MD&A follows the transmittal letter, and you'll see another paragraph in there where we repeat it again. The general fund's $38.4 million unassigned fund balance, again 40.9%, and again the fund balance policy of 30 to 35%. And I repeat it, that the District Board of Commissioners and in past years this has been used to reduce the ad valorem taxes paid by member towns. So the committee chair just asked us to do just a quick run through so everybody has the chronology, how your finance organization is following the charter in development of the budget, but we also exceed the charter requirements in reporting the surplus, where we've reported it multiple times in the June Board of Finance meeting, in the transmittal letter, and the MD&A. And then come September, we will in fact have a recommendation on how to use the $5.5 million, but ultimately it'll be the board's decision on how to use it.
Bob, thank you for, and I'm not, if you have more, that's fine.
No, that's it. That's
ask
everything.
a question here. So and the question originally, and I thank you for walking us through the whole finance part of the charter. I think that helps everybody put this in context. But it was 3.8 or 3-8 that we asked about, and so what it says, in my understanding, in 3-8 is that you can't expend any part of the surplus or exceed any part of the original budget without you certifying that there's money in the fund balance to do it.
Well,
basically
here's
what
the
it
entire section on the screen.
Yeah, I just, let me finish, okay? So the reason that we asked that was, if you remember, that during our deliberations on the budget this year, we had a suggestion that we create a rate stabilization fund, and that we had to appropriate some money for it. And we also had another, that was for water, and we also had another suggestion that we create a rate stabilization fund on the ad valorem side, if there's money available to do it. So that's a question that's out there, and I think that we're going to want to know for that September meeting or wherever when we get to it, is this going to be available for us to do what we thought we might be able to do if there was a surplus and sufficient to cover the cost of those rate stabilization funds. So that's basically where we're at, and the part that I brought up with you was that we have to rely on you to certify just how much there is in that fund balance, and it says that you have to present a certification or a certificate, transfer certificate.
Well, I think it's important to note that, yes, September will have a recommendation, but it's not 3.8 that compels it. 3.8 is specifically, it follows 3.7, the adoption of the budget. 3.8 is only speaking to if you want to spend more money than what was approved, there's a process for getting a supplemental appropriation. So this is not a surplus from the prior year. The surplus from the prior year is what the fund balance policy says I got to report by September. This 3.8 is just saying, if you want to spend more money than the budget that you just approved in 3.7, you have to, the board has to get the recommendation from this committee in the form of a resolution where I'm certifying that the money's available for the supplemental appropriation. That's what 3.8 says.
Okay, I think what it says, Bob, and to me, and I'm willing to have somebody tell me that maybe I got this wrong, but I think what it says is that no one can in an active budget, if we've developed a surplus, which we did, and during the course of the year, and we didn't we don't know how much it's really going to be. I know back in November, it was a bigger number than 5.5 million. So we don't know what it's going to really be. But what it says is that you can't spend any of that. You're going to take this and put it in the fund balance. It's going to wind up in the fund balance, and then we decide how much of that we want to spend. The fund balance has to be at what we said, it's between 30 and 35%. We use that whatever surplus there is to keep it there. But if we want to spend it on something else, then we have to know how much there is there to spend. That's my understanding, and that's why I think we went ahead with the rate stabilization fund and sort of hung it on the opportunity to do it if there was a surplus. So,
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Scott.
So I just want to clarify, and I think there might be a misunderstanding. What Bob is saying is 3.8 doesn't come into play until after you approve the budget. And so let's assume on December 31st, the board approves the budget, and the board decides to spend the $5.5 million within the budget, however you decide to do it. It's already spent. It's gone. So this provision is only to say, if the board chooses on February 1st to spend $1 million on something that wasn't in the budget, Bob under 3.8 has to go find another, not the 5.5, it's gone. It's already gone. You've already incorporated that into the budget. Correct, Bob?
But how do we know?
Yeah.
We didn't know there was
already got it
5.5
for the
yet,
next
Scott.
year.
We
No,
didn't-
no,
Right.
but let me just clarify, We do know because Bob just explained, we've told you, and this is the process we've gone through with the budget process. We've done this since 2019. We are telling you now, we've told you in June, the audit told you there's $5.5 million. We will bring that to you as a recommendation in September. Here's what we're recommending to spend the 5.5 on. The board can say, no, I want to do this, I want to do that. That's fine. They may say, I don't want to do anything. That's a problem because you're supposed to give the money back to the towns. But the point is, whatever is decided at the board level on how to spend that 5.5 is not part of this 3.8. This 3.8 is if you've already decided to spend that fund balance, that 5.9%, that 5.5, and it's incorporated into the budget. And then after the board approves the budget, you decide to spend more, you have to follow 3.8.
Supplemental.
And so you're supplemental. So that means you're going to say, let's just say the board says, listen, we got a valve that it needs to be replaced at West Hartford Filter, and this has happened, $1.5 million to replace 2 valves. And we say, we have to do it. And the board says, okay, we're going to authorize you supplemental. Bob, certify to me that that $1.5 million that I need to fix those 2 valves is not encumbered somewhere else within the organization. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
I
think,
please do, because I think we're saying the same thing, and
I think you are too. No, I think you are too. Once the budget's over, right, December 31, you've set your budget. You've set it, the district board has set it. This is Chris Stone's talking about it. The board set it. That, whatever that number is, you call it 5 million, whatever it is over and above the 35% as per the policy, whatever that number is, right? You've decided, or the board's decided, how they want to allocate that money, whether they want to keep it as surplus, whether they want to use it towards the ad valorem, towards water, whatever it might be. But once you decide, the board decides what to do with that 5 million, or I'm using that number as a hypothetical.
That's when it goes away.
It goes into a budget number, an ad valorem number, perhaps, a water rate number, perhaps, or something else, perhaps, but it's part of the budget. Now, that's 2003. Now, our budget for 2004 is that 5 million. Now, that doesn't mean that 35% that is our retained fund balance may be available, based upon your certification, for an additional appropriation after that budget is established, at some point in 2004. In Scott's example, that $1 million to pay for a new wastewater pump station, whatever it might be. So there's still money within that 35% excess to pay for that. And that's what would be certified by you to be not only available, but
That's not,
unencumbered.
before you go on any further, that's not what I asked Bob. So what I asked Bob back in March was, when will we know if there's going to be a surplus that we can use to
Sure.
create these rate stabilization funds? Bob said, well, we will know sometime in May, but we have to know by June 1st because the audit's got to be done, okay? So we're waiting find out what the surplus is, and Scott's CEO report that came out at the end of May, I believe, says it's 5.5, but that wasn't reported to us yet, but it's basically 5.5. So, okay, so now we know there's a surplus of 5.5 in the 2023 budget. Okay, who gets to do anything with the surplus? Okay, so that was my point, that,
You're the board,
that
you're the board, that's fine.
we have a proposal to do a rate stabilization fund on both sides, water and sewer, okay? So, but we can't do anything with it till we know how much the surplus is, okay?
Right.
And that was my point, that we needed to know what the surplus is, and then if we decide that we want to spend it, to accomplish what we talked about before, then I think we have to tell Bob, certify that it's there, and then we can tell him to go ahead and spend it.
But that word certification is where it creates more confusion than certification is referred to in 3.8 for a supplemental appropriation. Large C. Small c, certify, state, represent, communicate, whatever it might be, what the surplus is. You're going to get there. You've got that now, right, Bob?
Yeah, well, yes, it's 5.5. All the numbers are clear.
So,
In the audit?
and it's
Yeah.
your board, this board, and the district board that decides what to do with that money for purposes of the 2005 budget.
25.
25,
But
2025.
just to clarify, we've done this since 2019, the same process. We did it last year, we did it the year before. The board is going to decide how they spend that excess revenue from 2023 in 2024, or 2024 to 25. That's the process. But as Bob mentioned in March, or earlier, February, we don't know the exact amount, and we're very cautious until the auditors say it's 40.9%. And so, but the point is, in the budget process, the committee since 2019 has chosen to accept recommendations or modify recommendations from staff on how to spend that excess. And that excess is anything above the 35%. We did it last year, we did it the year before, and we're going to do it the same exact way we did it last year, this year. The board will see a recommendation from Bob and from staff. Here's our budget, here's our expenses. We always say, we caveat because it's still September. We still don't know what the September and October water rates, water consumption is going to be. So we're kind of guessing and projecting on the water consumption side. But we will bring a presentation to say, here's where we think we can best utilize that $5.5 million. And the board might say, as we've said last year, we want to put X amount of dollars in the new rate stabilization fund for the sewer. We might want to put so much money on the water side put into the master plan. But this committee is the one who decides that, and we've done that every year. I think the way I'm hearing this is I'm concerned that this certification under 3.8 is being assumed that the 35%, the rate stabilization, the revolving fund is that's what they're referring to. They're not referring to that here. They're referring to after the board approves a budget in December, if the board wants to modify that's already been published, that's already been submitted to the towns, if you want to increase the budget, you have to go through 3.8 process.
I think it's just 3.8 is if anybody wants to spend more than we appropriated. I think, but just Scott, I'm not taking issue with anything that you said, but maybe we could have at some point we can have someone read back the resolutions that were passed here and at the district board on financing the rate stabilization funds, so that everybody understands what we're talking about. That's the reason I asked Bob. I was trying to figure out, as soon as possible, is there going to be money available to do what we wanted to do? And the rest obviously is available to do other things. If it's there, as long as we maintain that 35% fund balance, we maintain our good ratings with the bonding agencies, and the rest is what we can use to make improvements wherever we need to. So that was my point. And, so 5.5 is what we expect to be dealing with. Is that pretty much?
No, perfectly said. I'll add that the 5.5 is general fund, so it's sewer only. It won't be used to reduce a water rate. And one of the reasons why we wait until September is because the surplus is just one piece, right? We have our actuaries determining what our OPEB contribution is going up. That's another piece. Our pension contribution is going up, another piece. We already know what our contractual obligations to our existing employees are in the upcoming year because we signed the 4 and 5 year contracts. So we'll incorporate that. Any additional personnel needs on the operations side. But anyway, so that's what you've charged us with. We'll gather all the pieces and then bring them to you in a recommendation, and you'll let us know if you like the recommendation, or if you want to change it, or if you're okay with maybe we do a small ad valorem increase and put some of that surplus in the rate stabilization so the futures won't be so high. I hope that we can achieve a 0%. Again, wouldn't that be nice to have all those years of flat ad valorem? But I don't know till I have all the pieces. I present it to the executive management, and then we all present it to you in September.
One last thing, Bob, would be, you just said that the entire 5.5 surplus is in the sewer side.
It is.
So does that mean that no surplus was generated on the water side, or that it wound up on the sewer side somehow? Can you explain that to everybody? I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure everybody understands that.
The fund balance policy is a general fund balance policy. We don't have the general fund is reported with a modified accrual basis, and the water utility is a full accrual basis. So a general fund has a fund balance, and the water utility has a net position. It's a little more difficult when you're looking at financials on a full accrual basis, because whereas on the modified accrual basis, we're looking at 1 year out. It's really easy to say, here are my revenues in for a year, here are my expenses out for a year, this is what I want my impact to be. On the water utility side, with the full accrual basis of accounting, they take the entire value of the assets and bring it back to time zero, the entire liability for OPEB, entire liability for pension, and bring it in. So that's typically why you won't see a fund balance type policy for a water utility.
Well,
But we report on the
really not really
performance of
asking
the
about-
water utility. You had that presentation by Jessica Aniskoff.
Yeah, I really wasn't asking about the fund balance policy. And what we're asking is, was a surplus generated through the water rate? And the point about that is, I think that we have a responsibility as commissioners, and particularly here at the Board of Finance, to make sure that the rates are, are responsible with respect to paying the expenditures and not developing huge surpluses for unidentified purposes. So I think that you're right. On the sewer side, it's different, and maybe an accrual, and maybe on an accrual basis, it's different. But by the time we get to June 1st, and the audit's produced, isn't it a cash basis at some point where you say that we actually raised this much money through the water rate? This is a dollar amount we raised through water rate?
That was in Jessica's presentation when she presented the financials. She presented the governmental funds, the general fund and capital funds and the like. And she also did the proprietary funds, which has the two enterprise funds, which are water and hydro, and our internal service funds. So that was all reported. I'm
not suggesting it wasn't. All I'm saying is that, you said that the entire surplus winds up on the fund balance.
Well, because it's a general fund surplus.
Okay.
Yeah,
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's only for sewer.
I got it. Okay. I think that
Yeah.
anytime we're talking about a $5.5 million surplus, I think that people have the expectation, or right to have an expectation that we have to, explain, why we generated a surplus and that we didn't, simply just overcharge the customers. I think that that's our responsibility. So that's,
Well, you'll remember this from Scott's monthly reports, but I'll repeat it. Two big reasons. The interest income, no one would have predicted that the interest earned on our deposits in 2023 would have been as high as they were. And then sludge revenue, for all the reasons Tom has reported, is high. So those are the two big drivers on the sewer side.
and we did on the sewer side, and we did talk about that, and there were unexpected revenues, and we're all very happy about, especially the interest rate and also the sludge thing. So we got it. So unless there's any other questions, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Curry, two questions, maybe multiple parts. The first question is to Scott. You said we're supposed to give the surplus back to the town. Supposed to is kind of a strange word to use.
Sure.
We ought to, but we're not obligated to, correct?
Well, I would ask the resolution that was passed for the fund balance.
Yeah, the fund balance policy.
Says you're supposed to give it back. So I'll give you an example.
No, it's supposed to is not obligated.
Okay, that's up for you to decide. But here's the point we would make is that if the fund balance, and we'll use this year as an example, fund balance is just for sewer, just for the general fund. Net position is how we define how much money we made and have in the bank for water, and we'll talk about that in a second. But let's assume we've got $5.5 million, and let's assume that we only need $4 million, and with everything Bob talked about, we haven't talked about staff yet, we haven't talked about the pension contribution, we haven't talked about OPEB contribution, and let's say that all we need is 4.5 of that $5.5 million, and we could make Avalorum zero. Let's assume that's where we are. Then the board could say, okay, what are we going to do with that extra $1 million out of the 5.5? And the board could say, let's put it in the rate stabilization fund. Perfect. Or a situation could happen where we say, listen, we need all 5.5 to make Avalorum zero. The board could say, I don't want to make Avalorum zero. I want to make it 2%, whatever that is, and say, okay, you're not going to use the 5.5 to make Avalorum zero. You're going to make it something different, and it's going to be 2%, and we're going to take the amount of money, whatever that is, $2 million, whatever the number is, and it's going to go into the rate stabilization fund. So the board can choose to do that. The question I have is the resolution and how it's written around the 35%. And I would defer to...
I have the policy on the screen. Number 3 says, in the event of a target excess, the district board will determine the use of the target excess as it deems appropriate.
Perfect. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's your decision.
There's no ought to
It's your decision.
No ought to anymore.
Yeah, so
No
there's
supposed
lots
to.
of options.
Yeah, listen.
It's up to the board.
Okay, and let's, I'll call on you in a second, but I just wanted to say, I don't know if all your questions are answered
yet.
yet, but my point is, if we take a whole bunch of it and apply it to the ad valorem to bring the zero increase in the ad valorem down, and then we put some more in a rate stabilization fund, or we balance it some other way, it's the same thing.
Right.
You put it in a rate stabilization fund, it's gonna lower the ad valorem in the future, not today, but tomorrow,
You
you know,
don't
and
create
it's the same thing,
one
so.
time.
Right.
Can I ask my second question?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Second question may be for Bob, maybe for Chris. If we can't, and Chairman asked an excellent question to determine that we have fund balance for water. If we can't now, can it be changed so that we can, rather than have that fund balance in water go to the general fund, go into the water rate stabilization fund directly?
Well,
Because once it goes to the general fund, we've lost that ability to put it in the rate stabilization fund for water.
so the sewer general fund has its own revenues, its own expenses, and its own fund balance. And then in December of last year, you created a rate stabilization fund that if there's excesses, you could put it in and help lower the ad valorem in the future. But the two others that you mentioned, the water utility fund is separate from the clean water fund. The clean water fund is the other fund that has a rate stabilization fund that we have all these acronyms, but that the clean water project charge that goes to the customers every month, it comes in as revenue, pays all the debt service for the revenue bonds, and then the surplus goes into the rate stabilization fund. It's called a rate stabilization fund because we're trying to stabilize what the rate payers, the clean water project charge payers are paying. And you'll remember our most recently adopted commitment, or that we presented to DEEP, was in September of 2022, and it goes up slowly, plateaus for a few years, and then goes up again. That's what that rate stabilization for is, strictly the clean water project charge.
But just to clarify, I think the commissioner asked, and I think there's a perception that any revenues, excess revenues from water is going into the general fund.
Never.
That's not true.
No.
It's
Segregated
separate, and
entirely.
so what we refer to on the water side as your water utility is net position.
Right.
And net position is completely different from the general fund. It's just water. There's no money crossing water to sewer or back both, right? So the net position, it was defined as about 60 million.
Well,
Just explain the net position,
Yeah.
and
Well-
that's the only way to simplify and compare the general fund to the water fund.
perfect. Scott's recollection is perfect, but just to give you one of the challenges of looking at the financials on the water utility side, it will say something, and I wish I had the numbers memorized, but for example, it'll say your net position is $280 million. It's made up of capital assets of $300 million in a negative unassigned net position, or in this case, it's called unrestricted, of a negative $20 million. So you know, on the general fund side, it's easy. We say, hey, here's our fund balance. Here's how much is unrestricted. Let's keep that to 35%. But when you look at the water utility, it actually has a negative unrestricted number. And it's because we have all the liabilities from the future coming in and being charged in that column. So Scott's point is what I've always done is I said, listen, let's try to get a relative comparison between the 1 year look of the general fund and the multi-year look of the water utility. And what I do is I take the current assets, those assets that are cash in the bank are expected to be received within 1 year, minus the current liabilities, which are those costs that we anticipate spending within only 1 year, not 30 years worth of pension promises, and subtract one from the other. Scott's recollection was perfect. We have $111 million current assets, and we have $51 million current liabilities. So that's a current net position of $60 million. So, that's one way to look at it. So 60 million on I think we're $113 million, I believe, or $110 million is what our water operations is. It's good, but it's necessary for the capital-intensive water utility operation that it is. Yeah, I wouldn't call that a surplus
Yeah,
because
right.
technically we have a negative or we have a deficit in our unrestricted funds. I know you asked me to explain it, but it is difficult to do it. And that's one of the reasons why you typically don't see a fund balance policy. You hire people like me, you hire the actuaries and the like to come in to say that your water utility fund, and you go to rating agencies, is fiscally strong. So, by the way, we just had our rating presentations last week.
I think we
We'll get them
appreciate it,
soon.
Bob, so thank you. Well, let's let Commissioner DeBella ask a question.
Just for the record, I believe it doesn't apply that whatever we have should be paid down on the ad valorem. The ad valorem issue is a determination of the Board of Finance first, and then obviously the board itself. Until the Torpy Amendment, the issue of what happened on that was up to the Board of Finance, and the board required a 2/3 vote to override the position of the Board of Finance. So, and the only time we've ever done anything where we used the surplus was when we proposed the money problem we have with the state of Connecticut on the issue we had relative to the money that was going into the landfill. And we stated that we take the first $2.5 million, pay back the district board, and the rest of it would be allocated to the towns for that specific instant.
Are there any other questions from commissioners regarding this issue? Did you have?
Just really quick, Mr.
Sure.
Chair, if I might. Chris Stone, just to answer your question a little more directly, we don't mix water and sewer, right, Bob? Is that fair?
No.
It's totally separate funding mechanisms, separate payors. Once water's the ratepayer, the customer, the other one's the towns. But we do have a way within both on the general fund, the sewer side, and on the water side, if we so choose, to create that or to generate that additional revenue to create these funds for financing water projects on the water side and sewer projects on the other side. So that's right in the charter, 3.4 and 3.5 of our charter. So there's an ability, even though it looks like the surplus can only go to sewer because that's really where it's generated. But you can generate that through the water side.
What would you do with it?
You can put it. You can put in a state. We've already created a
Yeah, I think Scott. I think Scott already said, and I agree with him. Scott.
No, but on the water side of the budget.
It's going to go against the clean water project. You're going to generate a surplus that's going to get used against the clean water project. That's basically the water. It doesn't leave the water side
Doesn't leave the water side.
Okay, that's the point.
Chairman, but it can be used for purposes of financing water facility construction generally, not just.
Right.
That's all.
Okay. So I think that
Beat that horse.
we'll move on to the next item if there's no other questions. I do want to say, Bob, thank you, Bob, for we finally got this thing out. I'd say there was a good reason for this, and it wasn't really, in my mind, it wasn't really to do anything other than anticipate that in September, I think, or September and October, this board meets with the town managers and the mayors of the various towns. And we've always done that, and I think it's a great, for me, it's been an opportunity to actually communicate with the towns and to have a better understanding of our relationship with the towns. And obviously, particularly on the ad valorem side that they're interested in. Okay, there's occasionally comments about water, but, you know, the cost of fire suppression stuff and all that, but basically, it's mostly about the ad valorem side. And I anticipate every year what they might say, and I just wanted to have an answer for them when we get there.
Sure.
And if I were one of them, and I heard that the MDC had generated a $5.5 million surplus in the general fund, I would want to say, okay, so what are we doing with the surplus? You guys charged us $5.5 million more than what you needed, you know, to do this, so.
Only because we didn't know what we needed.
Well, yeah, we didn't, and I think that we have to be prepared to give an answer to that. And I think Scott's right when he says that, you know, we should, if there's money available, that, you know, it should go back to them. If we generated it from them,
Right.
that it should go back to them in some reasonable amount, once we've paid other things and so forth. So I think that my question to asking for this was based on what I need to give as an answer when we get to that point, that we have a certified, you know, surplus, and what are we about to do with it? That's the reason.
I talked to the finance directors, and I answer the same thing, and I'm proud of the actions of the Board of Finance and the district board, because it's easy for me, because I tell them, we identified the money in June, and we gave it back in September in the form of budget relief for the ad valorem. That's what we did with the 2.5 million. And it lets them know that there's always going to be unanticipated revenue increases or decreases, or expenditure increases or decreases. But at least at the end of the year, when you identify that surplus, it's coming back to them immediately. So that's a good position to be in. It makes my job talking to them easier as well.
Thank you, Bob.
Sure.
When do you have those conversations, Bob?
Well, the finance directors are
Told
calling.
us that we have the authority to put it wherever we want to put it. When are you having those conversations with our towns?
Well, I've reported what's been done. I don't make commitments for the future, but no, they call me, well, frequently throughout the year, mostly when we're doing the ad valorem split, and they want to get a comfort level behind what their share is going to be in a given year, and also, yeah, I'm talking, and they do ask those questions, but no, I don't commit on behalf of the MDC, but I've let them know what you've done in the past.
Okay, because through you, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that this committee and the district board, based on recommendations of this committee, would have the ability, and does have the ability, that you could say to the towns, yes, we could do what you just said, or we might choose to invest it elsewhere within our budget that, in a long term, would be more beneficial to the member towns in terms of ad valorem.
Okay.
So we don't have to give it directly. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, and just to clarify, you know, Bob's challenge with the towns is we're on a calendar year, the towns are on a fiscal year, so they're always anticipating what's going to happen in, you know, and they're looking in March, April, May, and they're saying what's going to happen in December. So
Right.
it's a difficult thing with the towns, but it is the decision of the board what happens with that fund. So we're just going to make recommendations as to what we know and see in the budget process. And
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm going to call item number 5, consideration and potential action regarding approval for state of Connecticut financing for drinking water fund. Bob, do you
So moved,
have
Dad.
this?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, this is for the replacement of water mains associated with several streets in the vicinity of East Hartford. We come to you throughout the year grabbing clean water funds from DEEP or drinking water funds for DPH. This happens to be drinking water from DPH. It's the first sentence says we're seeking the approval to execute and deliver an IFO and PLO. So the interim funding obligation allows us to start spending, and then when the project's done, all that spending gets converted into a loan. So that's the PLO part of it, the permanent loan, our project loan obligation. This case, the project's $4.1 million. We're getting 36% grant, $1.5 million. So this is a good one, but when all the project spending is done and it becomes a loan, $2.6 million will be same terms as on the clean water side, 2% for 20 years. So this is our request to enter into this agreement with the state's DPH.
Are there any questions for Bob? Okay, hearing none, I guess the appropriate motion would be to adopt the resolution and recommend it to the district board. So is there a motion?
That's been done, Ben. We did that.
Well, we didn't, but I mean,
Moved, I seconded.
oh, okay, I thought we just moved the discussion. Okay, so we did, okay, so then I think if there's no further discussion, then all in favor of the resolution as written here, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. All right, the next item, item number 6, Commissioner request for 2025 budget. Received a number of requests from commissioners to at least ask that the budget include, for purposes of its initial presentation, some additional items as we did last year. First would be to the climate study that we're actually working on now. We appropriated $50,000 for. I'm not sure we're going to get all the way to the end of that yet, but it's already August. But we could put in $50,000 again, and then if we get to a point by December where we think we don't need it, we can take it out. So that would be one. I would ask that we include that. We never did get to the management study, which we also appropriated $50,000 for this year. I don't know if we're going to get to it this year, so I would like to at least include it in next year's budget again. So that would be $50,000 for a management study. And also we had a discussion earlier to the possible use of a labor council. And I would propose that we carry a number in the budget for now until we decide what, I think we'd have to have a number before people actually decide. If we carry a number of 60,000 in the budget presentation. And then I've asked, I haven't heard back from the rest of the chairman, but we may hear some further suggestions on this before we actually start putting the budget together from Public Works and Water Bureau. There may be some other additional suggestions or other committees. But for now, I'd ask that you include those. And if there's anybody here that has any other suggestion on behalf of the district board, this would be a budget items that the district board would propose.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I just have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner Mandyke. I just want to ask, is it typical where individual commissioners can just ask for line items to be put into the budget? I have some that I would like to put in as well, but I'm just curious as whether or not, does a committee have to vote on that? Does staff have to present? I don't know how it's been, I haven't seen it in the past like this. Typically, I believe finance goes ahead and votes on other extended line items and stuff like that, rather than just asking Bob to put it into the budget. So I'm just asking for the procedure for that, if I
Yeah,
could,
it's just in
Mr.
the
Chair.
budget presentation, and it has to be voted on before it goes anywhere. And certainly did it last year, and then the Board of Finance voted on, for instance, the climate study, and then sent it to district board. You know, we just needed an amount. We needed an amount from, staff gave us an amount that they thought was reasonable for that. And I'm suggesting at this point that based on what we've done in the past, that 60,000 might be appropriate for Labor Council, but staff can propose something else. But we're just asking for a line item that we can determine whether or not we want to use. So it's not set in the budget at all. It's just part of the original presentation for us to deal with.
So, Mr.
We
Chair,
did
if
the
I could
same
just,
thing last year.
if I could follow up. So if an individual commissioner had a line item that they would propose, we would just go to Bob and say, hey, Bob, we would like that put into the
No,
budget.
you don't go
and
to
then
Bob, you come
finance-
to this commission.
Board of
And that's where
Finance.
I got these would come to
authority
the
over
Board of
the budget,
Finance. You know, so it's not going to Bob.
So then with your three that you suggested, does the Board of Finance have to vote on it
I
right
had
now
a-
to submit
yeah.
it, to have it presented? I'm just asking because there might be some things to bring up.
We're asking them to propose a number that's reasonable with respect to what the expectation was. Last year, we asked for a number on climate study, and 50,000 is what came back, okay? So we're asking for Labor Council, and we're asking for a management study. We asked last year, and 50,000 came back. And we discussed it and voted on it and sent it to district board, and district board dealt with it. But I've had requests on each of these. Obviously, climate and management were already from last year. We haven't gotten there yet. The only new one at this point is Labor Council, which we discussed, and we're asking for staff to take a look at what we've spent on Labor Council in the past, and if 60,000 seems reasonable. That's what I'm asking, so,
If I might.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
go ahead.
The 2023 budget for 2024, did the PPI committee vote for the climate study and the management study before the Board of Finance acted?
No, we had to have a number. We needed a number.
No, I'm just talking about process here, that's all, I don't.
Yes,
Go
they
for
did.
anything you want. Without a number, it's meaningless with the budget, so.
I think I would,
They did.
this is John Myrtle. I would need to look back, but I think that there was a vote with a recommendation from PPI.
As being the committee of cognizance on the substance of what was being presented, climate study, management study. Well, we can look at that.
Yeah, I
that's
would
fine.
need to
There
look.
was, we put it into the board.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that, you know, two of the things that we have here we've already voted on. So, the climate study and the management study. So it's Labor Council that we've had a discussion about. I think, in order for anybody to understand, you know, what it would mean to hire a Labor Council, we'd have to have some sort of, indication of what the value of that would be. And, we're asking for staff to give us a number for that, the way we asked for on the other studies. That's it, so.
I think if I found something, the October 25th, 2023 PPI meeting, there were agenda items for management study and climate study, and both those items were tabled. And then I believe at a subsequent finance meeting, a resolution was made. I believe Commissioner Adel either moved both or maybe just one of them had made a motion to add $50,000 for either of those items.
And we got the $50,000 number from staff. We asked for the staff. I sent an email
I wasn't.
that asked for it, so that's,
I
you know.
wasn't questioning the number, I just questioning whether the Committee of Cognizance, in that case, the Board of PPI, voted to do those two studies, and whether the PPI, the Committee of Cognizance on Labor, voted to retain Labor Council. Obviously, I know the answer to the last question because we just did it. They haven't done it yet, right? They had a discussion, but I don't know if they did. They
It was
voted.
on the agenda and it was
They didn't vote.
tabled, and then that was October 25th, and then I think it came back up at a finance meeting. Motions were made to add it to the budget. Staff was directed to find that within
Right.
the proposed budget, and that's how it went out.
But the
But
50,
I stand corrected, then
Yeah,
Mr.
go
Chairman, I
ahead.
assume.
And what I'm asking is, before we get to a point where we have to tell staff to go find something, we're asking them to consider, what would it be first? So, go ahead.
right, that was the issue. The $50,000 for the for the management study was to get staff to determine within that $50,000 what it would cost and how it would be done, da, 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 da. That was what, it wasn't 50,000 for a management study. It was to determine what that cost would be, because the management study would be significantly more than $50,000. Staff gave us some numbers on it, but they were rough numbers, and that's what the $50,000 was supposed to be allocated for.
I agree. Commissioner Curry.
Talk about the Labor Council.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about all three things.
23, I'm talking about
Go ahead,
24.
Commissioner Curry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Since we do have the chair of PPI here, I might suggest that should the chair be planning on putting further discussion on retaining private outside legal counsel on the agenda, that he could ask also for a recommended line item value. And then if action's taken, then it'll come to this committee.
Well, he has asked, and that's why I just put it on. That's why I just
Yeah,
did
but
that.
you're,
So,
you're
yeah.
asking for a
I'm
number
not-
that we don't have a line item for,
We don't have a line
because
item.
we haven't created it yet.
But we can't create anything until we know what the service is gonna be. I brought up earlier that we've had outside legal counsel in the past.
Yeah.
And what we've had, I've looked at, the actual budget amounts, that John Myrtle sent me, over the course of the last, I don't know, 10 years. And you can see like every other year is like 60,000, 55,000 or 70,000, for labor council. There's one year back, 12 or 13, I don't know, Chris, it was like 150, or it was a lot more. It was a.
I get you.
Yeah, so we don't need to see that. I'm just saying that on an average, that was what? So I'm asking is the carry number 60,000 until we can get somewhere with deciding on what we're going to do with this council.
I'm
So,
only suggesting that it's in PPI's court right now, it belongs to that committee. And to ask for a number for a line item that has not yet been approved and brought before this committee, I think is just a bit premature. I think we have to wait to go through the PPI committee, that's all.
well, the numbers weren't, they weren't approved last year when we asked for the climate study and the management study. We had to get a number first before we could talk about it. So, you know what? We can do it whatever way you want. I was asked to consider this, and that's what we want. So I don't see how we're violating any rule or, anything by asking for the budget, for them to consider a budget number for an item. But go ahead, go ahead, Commissioner Russo.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question as a point of clarification, just so I'm clear, as a member of the Finance Committee. You're requesting that a line item in the amount of $60,000 for Labor Council be included in the 2025 budget. Am I correct?
I'm asking that it be included in the first round, the
the
presentation of the
proposed
budget. I'm not asking to put it in the budget. I can't do that. We have to vote on that. What I'm saying is that,
But the draft,
that we get a number that they think is reasonable. And 60,000 was the number I came up with by looking at past budgets. If they have a different number, then they can certainly propose that.
are you asking the Board of Finance tonight to approve that
No,
conclusion?
nah.
Does it have to?
It's just a
does it-
discussion, Commissioner request. This is not a vote. I'm just asking the staff to include the numbers if they think that they're reasonable. We had the two I asked for, a climate study and management study, are 50,000 each. I don't know if we're going to get to the end of those. We may need to put it in next year's budget. It's a calendar year, so.
So this is a suggestion coming from the Finance Committee, or does Labor Council should that suggestion come from a different committee? You reference PPI, then it goes to the Finance Committee. I just want to be clear on that. I'm just asking the
Right.
question. Because I understand what, it seems from what Attorney Myrtle was saying, if I'm correct, if I heard him correctly, the climate study and the management study, there were motions that were passed in the past to include those as proposed line items in
Well, I would
prior
say, yeah,
budgets.
I'm gonna say that as far as the Labor Council, that, yeah, the PP&I still has to make a determination on that, but they're gonna have a number to help them make the determination
I
with.
see.
That's my
Okay.
proposal.
So
The other two have already been determined.
I get that.
Okay?
I know
We
that.
haven't spent the money yet, and
Right,
if we
I
don't
know. No,
spend it by the
that's
end
not
of
my
the year, we're
question.
gonna need to appropriate again, that's all.
That's not my question. Okay, so this is a suggestion for Labor Council, to include Labor Council, and it would go back to PPI to formally vote on that, to include it as a draft, as a line item in the draft budget.
That's correct.
right?
So that,
Okay,
yeah, so PP&I has a number that they can work with.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, then we have opportunity for general public comments. Have any general public comments?
Is there anybody online?
Any general public comments? Hearing none. Move on to item number 8, Commissioner requests for future agenda items. Any requests for future agenda items? Hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Without objection,